In this video, we're going to learn about using the calculator to get equations from data points, particularly paying attention to the difference in the steps for linear, exponential, and quadratic functions. So we're going to start off with a question from one of the previous STAR tests, and the habit I want you to get into from the very beginning if you're going to use StatEdit is to look at the question and see what kind of function you're dealing with. What I found is most students are very good at getting equations to linear functions. But there's three main equations in Algebra 1 that we use, main function types, and if you only can do the steps for linear and don't notice the other two, you're going to get 2 out of every 3 questions wrong. That's a 33%. Don't use this strategy unless you learn to do this. So, very first thing we do every time is read the problem and figure out what kind of function. If you can't identify the function, do not use StatEdit. Use a different strategy. But here we can see that this is a linear function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press my Stat key. The Stat key is located right here below the Delete key. And when I press the Stat key, it brings up my Stat menu. And I'm over in the Edit side, and I want to press number 1, which is Edit. And what that brings up for me is the table. And we are only going to be focusing with data points, so we only want to focus with L1 and L2. This will be your X value and your Y value of a table. So just think of this when you're filling this out as an XY table. And so what I'm going to do now that I have my table is I'm going to fill in all of my X values under L1 and all of my Y values under L2. Okay, so now that my table is completely filled in, I need it to give me the equation. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to press that Stat key again. And when I press the Stat key again, it's going to bring back up the menu. And this time when I'm looking at the menu, notice up here at the top, we were in the Edit, there's also the option for Calculate. And that's what we want to do, is we want to be able to calculate our equation. So using your arrow key, scroll over 1 to highlight the word Calculate. And when it's highlighted, now we have all the choices of the kinds of functions to calculate. This is where it was very important to know we were dealing with linear, because look at all the different choices. Now I've had students just go, oh, StatCalc 4, StatCalc 4, not even realizing that there's a whole bunch of options out there. 4 stands for linear regression, meaning it's dealing with lines, linear. So 4 we only use if the word we circled was linear, or the function we have is linear. So when I press the 4, also taught my students always double check. Once you've pressed it, it gives you linear regression up here at the top. It reminds you you've chosen to find the equation for a linear function. So just double check every time that you've got the right words up here, and then you'll use your down arrow key to scroll all the way through and highlight the Calculate. And once Calculate is highlighted, press Enter. And what that does is it brings up our equation for that function, for that line. Now, if yours doesn't have the R values turned on, don't freak out. This is the diagnostics. I reset my calculator, keeping the diagnostics on in case I ever needed the correlation. When you're testing, we always set it at test, in the test mode, so you should be able to see those all the time, but you're going to ignore them most of the time unless we're dealing with correlations. So what we do have, though, is the A value and the B value. And some students have never really understood what this is up here. This is just the format of the equation that you're going to plug this information into, meaning you got y equals ax plus b. you're going to take that a, which is -3, and plug it in there. And you're going to take that b, which is -10.5, and plug it in there. The x and the y stay where they are. So our equation is y equals, my a is -3, so -3x, plus b. My b is a -10.5, so I'm just going to do -10.5. That's my equation. Then I just look over to my answer choices and see which one has the -3x minus 10.5, and that's my answer. So now we have another question from the STAR test. So first thing I'm going to do, because I've now agreed that every time if I'm planning to use StatEdit, I'm going to determine what kind of function I have. So this time I have an exponential function. I'm going to circle it just to remind myself. Now that I know what I have, I'm going to press the Stat key, and that brings up my Edit menu. And since I'm wanting to add data, I'm going to press number 1. When I do this, it actually brings up what I already had in there from the last equation or problem I was working with. Now, I've seen students do several different things. Some of them go in and hit delete, delete, delete. Some of them just retype over. My problem with retyping over is if you miss something, you can't even tell that you missed something. So easiest, and the deleting takes a little bit of time, so let me just show you a shortcut on how to get these cleared. Put your cursor, you scroll up to where you've got the L2 highlighted. When your L2 is highlighted, you're going to press the clear button and then immediately scroll back down. When you press the clear button, nothing happens. It doesn't look like anything happens. But the minute you scroll back down, the whole row or column of data disappears. So then go up to L1, get it highlighted, press clear, and when you scroll down, the data disappears. Now we're ready to input the data for our new table. Okay, so here's our points, and I went ahead and just put them in. Once I have them put in there, I'm going to press my Stat key and scroll over to calculate, because I'm ready to calculate my equation. Now, this is an exponential function. We've determined that exponential is not 4 and it's not 5, it is 0. And there's no reason to even have to learn that. You can just scroll down. When we get down 8, 9, 10, when we get to 0, it shows us exponential regression. That means this is the one that will give us an exponential equation. So I select 0, I double check that yes, I did pull up exponential, and then press my down arrow key all the way to calculate. And once I get here, I can press the enter key to see the actual equation. Okay, so my equation. Now, notice that this is a different format. It's no longer linear. The format for this, right up here at the top, is y equals a times b raised to the x. I'm going to put my b in the parentheses. That's the way we're used to seeing it, raised to the x. That's our exponential function. And now they've given us the a value, the one that's going to go here, and they've given us the b value, the one that's going to go inside my parentheses. So my equation is y equals, my a is 0.0625, my b is 4 raised to the power of x. Notice that the x and the y stay as letters. And then I just go over here and look and see which one has the correct answer. And H is my answer. Okay, and I'm doing a little bit different one for you to kind of see some of your options. They've given me a quadratic graph, and they've asked for which function best represents it. I'm thinking about using StatEdit, so the first thing I do, I look at it and go, oh yeah, that's quadratic. They've told me it's quadratic. I'm going to use the quadratic calculation. Now, when they gave this to me, they didn't give me points. But if I can find 3 points, for quadratic you've got to have 3, because if you only have 2 it's going to want to do a line. But I can look on this and go, okay, I have a point right here that I can see. I have a point right here that I can see. And I have a point right here that I can see. At this juncture, I normally just set up a quick XY table and write my points down. So I've got -4, 0. I've got 1, 0. Those are my 2 zeros right here. And then my y-intercept, I've got 0, 4. So now that I have them written in table form, I find if I write it in table form, it makes it easier to see that I've done it correctly when I put it in the calculator. So I'm just going to take this table, I'm going to press Stat Edit, and I'm going to put the data in. I've already cleared the previous data and put in the new data. So once my data's in, now I can press the Stat key again. And when I press the Stat key, I'm going to scroll over to Calculate because I want to calculate my equation. Now remember, this time we're in quadratic. So I look down, and right below linear, the very next one says Quadratic regression. So since I know I'm in quadratic, I must pick that if I want a quadratic function. So when I press 5, I go ahead and verify on my screen that I've picked quadratic. Arrow key all the way down to calculate. And when I get to calculate, I'm going to press enter. And when I press enter, again, my R values are always turned on, but I now know my A, my B, and my C. And here it's given me the format of the equation. So if I take the format of the equation, y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. For the A, I'm going to put a -1. For the B, I'm going to put a -3. Let's put that in a color we can see. And then for the C, I'm going to put +4. So my answer to this thing is y equals -1 x squared, so I'm not going to write the 1, plus -3x, so -3x, plus 4. So there's my answer. I go over here and I find the one that is a -3x, x squared minus 3x plus 4, and I circle it.